Hi, folks. Today I thought I would talk a little bit about virtual racing. So, it's no secret that in this era of COVID 19, virtually all races have been canceled. A lot of them offer virtual options. There's likely to be more virtual options in the future. Nobody knows exactly when racing is going to get back to normal. So, this happens more and more. Of course, the problem is typically, virtual races or time trials are tough. It's fairly unusual for most people to be able to perform to their potential. In other words, if you're in shape to be able to run a 30-minute 5K, just to use an example, and you're doing it in a virtual race or a time trial, chances are you won't run 30 minutes. It'll be slower than that. It's a lot harder for you to do that. But it really shouldn't be, because if you've seen in the other videos, one of my sayings I'm sure I stole from somebody is that running is 80% mental and the other 20% is in your head. There's no reason that you shouldn't be able to perform to your potential in a virtual race. We just tend to not. But the reasons are all in our head. Virtual races aren't actually any harder than it would be if it was a real race. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some things that I believe you can do to help make it a little bit easier to address those virtual races. And I'll talk a little bit about a race that I did today, which wasn't a virtual race, but it also wasn't a real race, and how some of that stuff panned out for me. So the number one clue, or thing to do rather, and then I'll get into some details, is you need to make that virtual reality. You need to treat it like a real race. I think that's the first problem, is that if it's a real race coming up, we have things that we do, but we don't always do those same things for a virtual race because, it's not really a race, right? But that gets into your head that this doesn't count, it's not a race, and you don't want that. So first, you take a look at what do you do in the day or even sometimes days before. What's your routine? Whether it be, what you eat, what you're running. Do you post pictures, flat mark, the day before saying, hey, I've got this race coming up. But if you have a virtual race coming up, you should be doing in the day or days before everything you would do if that race was going to be with 1,200 other people. Don't just treat it like a virtual race. You want to make virtual reality. Think about your course that you're going to run. If possible, can you run a course where you know the distance? For example, I know a couple of 5Ks and at least one 10K where I pretty much know where they start or finish. I could look on Strava, maybe get it even a little bit closer. But going to some place where I know that, yeah, this is the right course, and then is there anything else I can do to make that course more real? For example, most courses have mile markers on there. We generally don't have mile markers. We have a virtual race, but you could. There's nothing to stop you from taking hunks of cardboard or something and putting 1, 2, 3, whatever on it, and going out that morning, in your car ahead of time and putting mile markers out for yourself. So think about, what would a course be like in a real race, and what can you do to make that more real for you? Think about your pre-race routine. What do you do before the race as far as, warm-ups and drills? So for me, I always get there about an hour early. I'm going to do X amount of miles, depending what the race distance is. I'm going to do some drills beforehand, but there's a particular routine that I always go through, especially for the big races. Again, do those for your virtual reality race. You're trying to do everything you do in a normal race. The start line. What can you do to make the starting line more real, if you will? Well, if you're running on a certified course or a course that you know about where you have a spot where you're going to start. Maybe you could have some chalk drawn on there so you know that that's your starting line. Think about other things that might happen at the starting line. Somebody gave me the idea that maybe just before the start, you take out your phone if you have it and you play the national anthem and you stand there with your hand on your heart with the national anthem, because that's what you would do in a race. I would encourage you to start on time, so to speak. If you're planning that virtual race for that day is going to start at 8, don't make it loosey-goosey. Make it, I start at 8, just like the race would start. And maybe somebody sounds a gun for you, whatever. Get off and do that. During the race, probably the biggest thing now is to really watch out for Howie. So when I'm talking about Howie, if you don't know, I'm referring to Howie Mandel. Hopefully most of you have heard of a TV show that he used to host a while back called Deal or No Deal, where he kept offering people, the contestants, deals. If you take this deal, you can get this, but you might get this if you get more. Go on YouTube. You can find some videos about it. But Howie will come to you typically in a virtual race much earlier than a normal race, offering you deals. Get yourself mentally prepared that you're going to have to tell him, no deal. I'm doing this. This is a race. I'm going to stick with it. And then you want to make sure you have the same post-race routine. I always do some stretching. I do a little bit of cool down. Maybe I always go out for ice cream afterwards, whatever that is. And you might think that the post-race routine doesn't matter because your virtual race is over. But I think it does, because it's all the planning. It's all about telling your brain, 80% mental, 20% in your head, that this is a real regular race and I'm doing everything like I do with other races. It just so happens it's just maybe myself, or maybe myself and a couple of friends if other people are running it with you. So let's talk today a little bit about I said I had a 5K today. It really wasn't a virtual race, but it wasn't a real race. So I do want to be sure to clarify that I certainly had elements of it that were like a real race, because it was. What they were doing with this race is the race actually takes place across 4 separate days that you can sign up for. Wednesday this week and Saturday, then Wednesday next week and Saturday. And after those 4 days, then the race is done. So you actually don't get to see the total results until the entire race is completed. You sign up for a particular wave. They were letting 10 people start per wave, and waves were every 10 minutes. You picked up your bib when you got there. There was no pre-pickup or anything, and it was just a bib. By the way, that's another thing with the starting line. Maybe you can get an old bib and wear a bib, even though it's not the bib for your race, because you wear a bib in a race. That makes it more real. But they had the bib for us, so we had that. We were asked not to stay there, though. They'll go back to our cars. They would let us know when our wave was going to start, and only then did we come up towards the starting line. After the race, you grab a bottle of water if you want, and then you're out of there. So there's none of the normal stuff that would happen before a race, where you're hanging around with your buddies and running into people and talking about the race, or hanging around at the finish line and cheering for your friend when he or she comes over. There's none of that. You get up there, boom, you go, you run, you grab your water, and you go. So those were elements that didn't make it like real race day. During the race itself, yeah, you get Howie talking, because I'm starting with 10 people. And what happened when I started with 10 people is one guy took off like a rocket, and so he's way in front of me right away. I think he ended up running like 18 minutes or something like that. I didn't see him for very long. I heard 2 women behind me going, we're too fast, we're too fast. But really, after about a quarter mile, I could see the guy gaining ground on me. I couldn't hear anybody behind me. I pretty much ran the whole 5K alone, and that does make it a lot like a virtual race. That's typically one of the worst positions for me to be in, is running in no man's land. I want somebody to chase. I want to feel like somebody's chasing me, and you don't have any of that. But throughout the week, I really treated this as much like a regular race as I can. And again, it was a race. There was a starting line. There was a guy who said go, but there are a lot of elements that were just like a virtual race. But I got there early. I did my warm-up. I did all those things. And I ended up surprising myself and having a really great race. In fact, I'm going to show you some great splits. I'm here to tell you, I got plenty of races where the splits aren't like this. So it doesn't always work this way. But you can see that my pace, mile after mile, just went faster, faster, faster. I just kept gaining speed. Typically, if I was doing a time trial or something virtual, it doesn't work that way. Usually by the time I get a little bit in, it's like, this is stupid. I don't need to do this. Howie is talking to me. And I just kind of bail. But I'm very happy that I just kind of continued to just take that down, take that down, take that down. In fact, this ended up being the best 5K I've had in 2.5 years, not quite 2.5 years, in a race where I kind of thought in the back of my mind, I don't know how well I'm going to be able to do, because I don't like racing alone. But I truly believe that besides the fact that I'm actually in pretty good shape right now, that a big factor was how much I treated everything like this is the same race I would normally do with 1,000 people or whatnot. The only thing that's going to be different is going to be just me, and I can't hang around with friends and things like that. So anyway, those are just some tips. Hopefully you have more tips. Put some comments down below if you've got other tips, because, racing is likely to look different for some time. I think you're going to see more and more places start to figure out some different things to do. It's probably a while before everything gets back to normal, but just because it's different doesn't mean that it can't be fun.